Hey, welcome to SoCo Chat. Once again, I'm your host, Paul Gullickson, Communications Manager for the County of Sonoma, and we thank you for joining us on this hot holiday week. Today's topic is the spending of your taxpayer dollars here in Sonoma County. We're going to dive into how the county makes its decision concerning funding and how it puts together the county's roughly $2.5 billion spending plan, which was recently approved by the Board of Supervisors. And to help us with that, we have as our special guest today, the chair of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, David Rabbitt, who represents the 2nd District in the county. But before we get to Chair Rabbitt, here is our trivia question for the week, and it is a Petaluma-based question. An 18-year-old skateboarder from Petaluma will be competing in the Olympic Games in Paris later this month. The question is simple. What is her name? If you know, call us at 707-565-2242 or email us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. That's public affairs, one word, at sonoma-county.org. And if you're correct, you will win one of our limited edition SoCo. We'll give it you a clean one. This one has my coffee in it. SoCo Chat coffee mugs. And in honor of 4th of July week, I'm going to throw in, I have a Pete's gift card I'm going to throw in there too. So you not only get the coffee mug, you get the coffee to go with it or whatever else you want in there. So don't miss out. Again, that number is 565-2242. So with that, let's move on to our discussion. Chair Rabbitt, thank you for being here on this hot holiday week.
No, it's great to be here. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, Paul.
Well, I do want to note, I don't often wear a tie on SoCo Chat, but I wore one in honor of you being with us. But I also because this is my presidential tie, and I wore it in honor of July 2nd, which, as you may know, was the actual day that the Declaration of Independence was signed. And John Adams thought, July 2nd was going to be our national holiday with fireworks and celebrations. Didn't quite turn out that way. I guess the news kind of spread a little slowly, so 4th of July became the actual holiday.
Yeah, at least they kept from going to the following Monday every year and having it rotate. I guess that would be the other alternative that the country does. But that's great. And, I pride myself. I've always worn a tie for every board meeting since I've been elected. And here I am today without the tie, and you have the tie. But that's a great one.
No, it's too hot of a day to wear a tie, as you've already noted. But I just wanted to call. This is actually my LBJ tie that I bought at the LBJ Presidential Museum in Austin, Texas last year. And my wife and I have made a commitment to go to all the presidential museums. And I also have a golf ball from the Richard Nixon Museum, which is an experience unto itself. But anyway, I wear it in honor of you and our holidays. So
that's perfect.
Yeah. Well, another great democratic celebration is the budget process, right? And it's a confusing one. We recognize that, but that's why we wanted to really kind of open it up today. And so we want to start off by giving our listeners a sense of what the county budget looks like and how decisions are made. And obviously we can't cover everything, but just some general things. If you were talking to someone who had never come in for a budget hearing, what would you say are the most important things you want them to know about how these decisions are made?
I think first and foremost, what I like to tell people is to let them know that we have truly an incredible staff that helps the Board of Supervisors really craft an operating plan, which the budget is for the approaching fiscal year. I think our process is very transparent. Excuse me. It's a public process, as it should be. And at the end of the day, the budget is the single most important policy document produced by the board.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to spend money on it, it's a priority, and,
right?
So on and so forth. So, the other thing I let people know is that it's not just the budget week. It's a budget year. Budget is crafted over many, many months. It's constantly being worked on and looked at. It's balanced. The expenditures equal the revenues. It's full of tough decisions, and especially true at the local level where I think what's true is the needs always outpace the resources. And it does include the board's priorities, but more importantly, I think it includes the community's priorities. And it is quite large at $2.5 billion, but I think as we'll talk about, a lot of that money is, set us for specific programs going forward.
Yeah.
Counties are an arm of the state. we implement those state and federal programs, and the monies follow that, and put a little pressure on us to make sure that we can be as efficient as possible going forward.
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But so overall, you could say that this was a no-frills budget, or as the county administrator's office called it, a maintenance budget. We didn't have a lot of extra money to work with this year, and there were a lot of requests for additional staff from our department heads, and they're all important positions, as you noted during the budget hearings, but you only had so much to go around. And so, but the bottom line is you avoided any reductions to core services. You didn't cut any staff, which is always a good thing. And you managed to still add, bolster reserves and add 43 full-time positions to the county's workforce. And we can, and those are all very important positions. So our question is, why is the county in so much better shape than the state, which, as we've been hearing all about, is dealing with a $46 billion deficit? What's the difference there?
Well, boy, the state is a difficult one to budget. Of course, they rely on just a small percentage of the overall population to really pay the bulk of the bills. The wealthy. And if that changes year over year, it really hits them hard. But I think at the local level here, it really reflects staff and the board's desire to not just approve a single year budget, but to actually look forward. Try to look over the horizon, try to be aware of trends, try to be sustainable. I personally, a smooth and steady fiscal experience is always favored over any kind of volatility. Yeah. You can find yourself with more money one year, spend it all next year, have to do cuts, and the county does not want to do that. And honestly, this year there was a lot of one-time money, and that's thanks to, I think, well over $20 million in tribal funds, for instance. And so we had considerable opportunities to spend one-time funds, much fewer opportunities to acquire new ongoing funds. The ongoing funds are the most important funds because those are the things that actually you can fill new positions with. You can't fill a position with a one-time fund. And
if you do, you end up having to cut the next year.
And again, I think
we're looking for the funding.
This idea of sustainability long-term is really taken seriously at the county. I very much appreciate that because I think it's really a responsible way to do it, and it takes some fiscal discipline on all of us, all of our parts.
Well, and as you know, it gets you off that crazy roller coaster. And if you can project and be consistent about these things and on occasion build up reserves, we're going to talk about that. But just to expand on the breakdown a little bit, roughly 42% of the county's revenue comes in the form of funds from state and federal government. And then in addition, 24% come from taxes, most of it property taxes right here. So it doesn't have that volatility like you mentioned that the state does in terms of so much of theirs comes from capital gains. And if you have a down year, suddenly the budget goes in the tank. And then there are about over 30% comes from charges for services such as building permits, fees, and other sources of direct revenue. So the source of county funds is not as valid. So what are your thoughts about that? Does that help the county be in a bit more predictable about where its revenue sources come from?
The broader the source of revenue, the more stable that you can be. We live in California, so property taxes are the bulk of what the county relies on, and with our homes being the values that they are and the supply and demand and everything else, property taxes are pretty stable. Of course, there's years like the housing bubble in 2008 where things go in the other direction and we can be vulnerable then. But, counties are much more property tax dependent than cities. Cities usually are more sales tax dependent.
And you're not as much.
No, and sales tax, you could have great years. Right now it's a little flat. So going forward, one would worry about that. So counties are a little more stable in that regard. Again, I think it's a good thing, though, in terms of counties versus cities. The counties are the entities that truly provide those services and create the safety net for individuals and families. So it's really important to make sure they have those funds available to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. For health care, wealth. I mean, a lot of those, if you say the county is an agent of the state, and we're distributing those funds directly to for food programs, housing, health.
And costs go up every year, so we want to make sure that we're doing our best to kind of control the overhead. But it's fact of life that things get more expensive year over year. But we just want to make sure that we keep up, especially with those mandated programs
Right.
that are being passed down from state and federal sources, because many times our costs will go up higher than the escalator that's built in or not
Right.
into those programs. And then we're that delta, that dollar amount, we're forced to come up with the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, the county budget that you and your colleagues just approved calls for roughly $2.5 billion of funding. That's a lot of money. But of that, you really only have about $430 million in discretionary funding. Would you help explain that to listeners of why that is, and why that you really don't have much of a choice in where $2 billion of the county budget goes to?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what I was kind of referring before regarding the mostly on health and human service side, right?
Yeah.
A lot of dollars for programs passed through the county specifically for those programs and can't be obviously used for anything else.
Yeah.
So it makes up for a great deal of those funds. Those are mandates and the responsibilities of the counties, and even of the $430 million in discretionary funding, what we call the general fund. A huge percentage of that is even, I would say, restricted.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as discretionary as one would like. It's for programs. For instance, the Justice Department Sheriff's Department is primarily paid out of that source of revenue. So, there's not always this huge ability to swing in new directions. So you have to be surgical about it.
Yeah.
And I think the board has been.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I know, and you're left in the position of trying to help out when things fall through the cracks. Like you had about 3 victims advocates from the district attorneys that lost some of their funding, and you were helping to find that funding as part of this budget process, right?
Yeah, and the county does have, I think, a very good policy of not backfilling state and federal sources, because if we start doing that, we will find ourselves in the wrong side of the red ink.
Mm-hmm.
But in this particular case, those 3 positions, for instance, were originally cut. They were added back in the May revise. Of course, when we passed our budget, that hadn't been yet finalized, so there was a possibility that it may or may not occur. We put contingency towards that, thinking that, okay, we're covered at least for a year.
Yeah.
If the state doesn't come through, it turns out that the state will pick that up, and
good.
And I think we're good there. But just making sure that we're aware of those kind of instances, and having having all the departments bring forward their needs is a positive for us in order to make sure that we're making the right decisions.
Yeah. Well, as you look back on the budget process this year, are you pleased with how it went, and what were some of the highlights for you?
I think for me personally, as chair, and this is now my 4th
time doing
year being chair, so I've had 4 budgets under my belt. For me, it's really important that there's so many different requests that are being made of the board, and items to consider, way more than we could ever fund. But I think it's important that every one of those requests gets a fair and equal opportunity and an airing. And I do believe, for me, this cycle, we were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some cycles we go down the list and we spent the money before we get to the bottom. There may be some great ideas or programs at the bottom that we haven't really got to. So I wanted to avoid that this year, and I think we did. Personally, there's times when I was frustrated over expenditures and different ways, but it's consensus of the board, and that's the way it works. I really feel like I'm the facilitator from the middle seat, making sure that everyone gets their opportunity to speak, and we could run an efficient meeting that allows for everything to be considered, and and do it in a straightforward fashion so that people can follow along.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I don't know if the listeners realize, but in Sonoma County, you actually bifurcate the process. You actually do budget workshops ahead of time where department heads are able to come in and talk to you explaining what it is they're looking, if they're asking for staff increases, why that is, why they're being required, they have to hire new people, or why there's what the program changes they're trying to make. So you can actually engage with them, and then 6 weeks later you come back with the budget hearings themselves, where you now have a chance to kind of you have all that information. Now you can make decisions on where best to allocate those funds. And I think that makes it a little less crazy, perhaps, than it used to be, right?
Oh, it's a great process, really. And we didn't do that many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have done it for the last so many years. And it is a great process, because those workshops are an opportunity for the board to really start getting into budget mode, understanding what every department needs, where their shortcomings are, and then, because at the end of the day, you're going to be asked to prioritize one over the other, perhaps, and really make those decisions. So the sooner that you can start doing that, the better. And I think it makes for better decisions in the long run.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing this year, which was a little unique, perhaps, on the first day of budget hearings, you had 54 members of the public line up to address the board. And like you said, each one had a different budget item or program they felt they really wanted to support. And does that, just candidly, does that really matter when members of the public show up like that? Can that make a difference, or have decisions sort of already been made by that point?
I think what's true, the board always welcomes the public and welcomes hearing from them, and that includes, of course, our community-based organizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
They do in this county. We rely on them to do a lot of work, and they do a lot of work, and they do a lot of great work. Does it make a difference? I think it really depends on the individual supervisor listening, to be honest, right? And at the end of the day, the budget is a zero-sum game. And as I said, the needs always outpace the resources. Sometimes you're forced to choose between, do I want to, put funds into a nonprofit, the work that they're doing, or do I want to put those funds into a county department to, lower the caseload or whatever it may be. So, that's a difficult choice sometimes. So I think it's all about balance. I personally do believe, and talked to the county administrator about this after budget, that the board would be well served to place some guardrails around some of the requests. Should the county general fund pay for a nonprofit's rent or capital improvement campaign? I don't know. I don't think so. So we could cap the amount and set year-over-year caps as well. And to be fair, we could do that to the Board of Supervisors requests as well.
Right.
And kind of, for me, I look at subject matter experts are the department heads and what they need. And I think the challenge for me is really understanding the appropriate caseload or the appropriate workload per individual, and how do you know when you add more employees in one department over another,
right?
And trying to find that those benchmarks to really say, it's really about, for me at least, supporting the core services of the county and doing that as well as we can, and then we can go off and do the other things. But let's concentrate on the core.
Yeah. Well, it's, several of you mentioned at the end of the hearings when you were wrapping up, how much you appreciated the members of the public coming in and engaging, because it is important, and you all, what you don't often maybe not agree, but it's important to hear the county's, the community's input. And as you mentioned, this is really not just the county's budget or your budget, it's the community. You want it to reflect the priorities of the community, and sometimes those result in some tough decisions. But it's great to see the public engaged in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's all positive. I've told this to department heads, and I think everyone should advocate for their own, what they believe, and make their best argument why you deserve money as opposed to this. Right. And it's just the way it should work. And so it's up to the board to make the decision, make the best argument, and then we'll make that decision going forward.
Yeah, the cake is only so big, or the pie, as you say.
Yeah.
Well, the last time we had you on, we discussed the high number of vacancies the county was experiencing this past year, which weighed into the budget discussions. Those vacancies were impacting the county's ability to deliver services in some key areas. And So my question is, has that situation improved?
It has, and I think everyone has done a great job of really getting out in front on that. I think in the justice services alone, it's been cut in half.
Yeah.
Right. I think from over 10% to about 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Health and Human Services.
You mean the vacancy rate was 10%? Now it's down this year to
and
5%.
Health and Human Services, I think that's been cut by about a third.
Yeah.
The vacancy rate again, so that's great. And Development Services as well has declined. So I think across the board that we're doing really well. There's always a few individual positions that are difficult to fill, and that's always been the case, to be honest. I think more so post-COVID. More so with people working in different ways that they are now, and remote work, and people's revelations through COVID about what they wanted to do in the future. There's always going to be certain positions that are going to be tough to fill, but we just need to be more innovative about how we go about that, seeking those people and making sure that we can fill those positions as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's always an ongoing process. But we also want to note that recognize that vacancies are something that many public agencies are struggling with, as we all compete for limited number of in some cases people moving available to serve in these positions, and so but there are some great opportunities available to come work for the county.
I mean,
still vacancies.
We have well over 4,000 employees, so you're always going to have vacancies. Right. It's just a matter of life. People are going to be coming and going, retiring. Yeah. And so there's always going to be a certain percentage. And usually that percentage is somewhere around 8-9.
Right. Yeah. That's what
And so it could be a little lower at sometimes. Some of those, it depends on the economy as a whole. If you're in a recession, people are less likely to go elsewhere. But if things are booming, there might be other opportunities. So it really all depends. But I think that we're doing a really good job about focusing in on that. HR and all the departments really have done a good job of filling those vacancies.
Yeah. Well, the board signaled that if any additional savings materialize this year, the priority was to be given to elevating general fund reserves. I want to talk about that. I know reserves are important to you. Why is it important in your mind to increase our reserves?
Well, it's like anything, right? If the board's goal is to have a certain percentage of reserves at all times, and that's best government practices. If your budget goes up, as our budgets do, just to keep pace with that percentage, you have to sock away more money.
Right.
And
for rainy days or dark days.
And in my tenure, we've only tapped the reserves once through our fires. And that's what it's for. But we do have this goal of getting ourselves back up to, I believe, a little over 16%. And went from 10 to 11, so we still have a ways to go. And so I think for me, it's really about eventually, it's just making sure that we always have the savings for that rainy day, making sure that we have a good bond rating, credit rating, in case we need to go in that direction. Right. We're talking about that already with whether it's the new county government center or even the climate and energy upgrades. The cost of borrowing that money will be lower the more money that you have in your reserves, and the more fiscally prudent you are, which I think is something that we should always strive for. Yeah.
Well, just to be specific, our reserves are a little over 10% now. We want to kind of creep it up to 11% or so.
Yeah.
That would be your hope.
We do have what we call the waterfall, because at the close of books, if there's additional dollars available, it will go towards paying down both unfunded liability, which is kind of paying down that pension and credit card, but then also going into reserves as well.
Okay.
And the third one on that is the county government center, but really making sure that we do our best to keep those things stocked.
Yeah. Well, I want to have you back on sometime to talk about the county government center, because we're running out of time today. But that's a whole subject unto itself.
Yeah, and all I will say is that if you look at the real estate market right now, what it costs to build versus what it costs to acquire office space,
right?
I think
there's some bargains to be had out there in office space.
There's some. We really need to be smart about that. Think long term, of course, but take advantage of the market. as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thought. Overall, we've gone through the budget process. We're halfway through the point. What is the economic outlook for the county? How are you feeling about where we're going?
I tend to always be a little cautious. I think you're seeing some signs over the horizon that I don't think we're heading into any kind of downturn, but it'll be much more flat.
Mm-hmm.
And even being flat around the county when prices go up, and
with the inflation we've been going
cost
through,
of doing services go up, that means that those are tough times as well. So, sales tax is turning out to be flat. We hear that from our consultant. Property taxes, the documentary transfer tax, which is that paperwork that, on property ownership transfers, has been going down. And so that we won't see that, that'll come out of the property taxes going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we can we'll see a change there as well. So I think we just need to make sure that we're, unlike the state, if I can say that, we need to make sure that we're just a little more conservative in that regard, and making sure that we're not doing anything too crazy to get ourselves caught. If we hire someone, we want to make sure that we don't have to turn around again in a few years and have a whole round of layoffs.
Laying people off. It's not fair to them. And
so I think the county works best if we can just make sure that we're on that smooth, steady slope, and that takes also looking at all these signs of the economy as a whole and the revenues that are going to come in over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years, as much as one can look over the horizon.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you're halfway through your year as chair. Do you have any particular goals in mind for the remainder of this year, other than to keeping us on an even keel and not be jumping things out of the budget process?
Yeah, again, as you mentioned earlier, as we sit here on the hottest day of the year, rolling into the 4th of July holiday,
gosh. Yeah.
I guess my first goal is, and kind of ever since 2017 has been my goal, not to have any disasters.
That would be
nice.
Nice. Absolutely.
And so, I again, as chair, I just see myself as the facilitator. The chair is really there to ensure the county meetings are efficient and run well, and occasionally speak on behalf of the county and the board. I strive to, be the best at those tasks, and if I am, everything else will fall into place. I do think that the county does some incredible work, a lot of incredible work across the spectrum. There's always making sure that we're looking out, talking to constituents about those things that are impacting the communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Sonoma County is a great place to live, work, and play. And we just need to make sure that we can continue to make it so.
For everybody who lives here, and for our next generation too.
Exactly.
Making sure they have a place to live too.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. As you mentioned, we've got a red flag warning today. We got a high heat coming. I think there's an air advisory too. So we've got the trifecta today. But it is the 4th of July week. Do you have like a tradition, a holiday tradition, or one you had when you were a kid that you remember?
Well, we used to when my kids were younger, we would seemingly always be camping about this time of year.
Okay, I love it.
And as the kids get older and they get their own jobs, the schedules become much more difficult to
get everybody together,
gather together. So our vacation tends to be a little later in the year, which is a problem because we go to the mountains, and if you go too late, the thunderstorms start. Last year we had 7 days of rain, so I'm hoping this year that we'll have a good week of camping. All the family will be together, dropping in and out as they can, as their schedules allow. But that's usually our 4th of July weekend. So it's a little unusual to be home without it. And we'll go down and to the corner of our block and look down the street and see if we can see the fireworks from the Petaluma Fairgrounds.
That sounds like something that we'd do as well.
Yeah.
Well, a happy July 2nd to you and to all our listeners. And thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate these conversations. And to our listeners, if you want to know more about Sonoma County's budget, we encourage you to go to a great tool that the county has. You can just Google SoCo budget, and the first thing will pop up. There's a link to our SoCo budget page in the county. And it's a great interactive tool where you can find out more and unpack many of the pieces we were talking today about the budget. So take advantage of that. We'd also like to give you a chance to win one of our SoCo Chat mugs. And as I promised, we are offering a Pete's gift card to go with it today in honor of our holiday. Here again is today's trivia question. An 18-year-old skateboarder from Petaluma will be competing in the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris in just a few weeks. What is her name? If you know, call us at 707-565-2242 or email us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org, and we'll get you your prize. Also, if you have comments about this or any other suggestion for a topic for a future SoCo Chat a segment, please email us at that same address, publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. We would love to hear from you. Thank you all. And we hope you have a wonderful holiday and continue to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and of course, YouTube. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Chair Rabbitt.
Thank you.